Welcome to the Business Blueprint. Today we're going to talk about friends and business. I've experienced two different things when it comes to this topic. And one thing I experienced is being business partners with friends, which I've done. And I've also experienced having friends work for me. And there's pros and cons to each scenario. Some people will tell you to never do it, that it's always a bad idea. I don't necessarily think that's the case. There's definitely been scenarios where it's worked out. It does complicate things though. So there's things you have to be aware of before you go into that situation. If this topic is interesting to you, hit the subscribe button because every other week I'm going to be releasing content about my experience in business. I'm not going to sit here and tell you do everything that I did. I'm going to be sharing mistakes that I've made, things that I learned from those mistakes. I'm going to also share you things that I've done the right way, but it's all going to be based directly on my experience as being a business owner and an entrepreneur. So hit the subscribe button. You'll see a new video on this topic every other week. I also have videos releasing about sales mastery, my experience in becoming a master salesman, how I did that, tips for people that are just getting started in sales and want to become a master salesman. I'm going to share as much value in that topic as well. And I'm also sharing my experience with self-improvement and positive thinking, how that's worked for me. And, it's everything that I share on this channel is meant to provide value by sharing my own personal experience. Back to the topic at hand. If you get into business with or hire a friend, the dynamic of the friendship is going to change. And if it doesn't change, then the business is going to suffer. So if you have a friend that comes to work for you, and the dynamic of the friendship stays the same, it's not going to work out because you can't be a boss and a friend at the same time. If the dynamic of the friendship does change, then there's going to be some feelings about the dynamic changing. So just make sure that if you're going to hire a friend to work for you, that you're prepared for that to happen. And more often than not, what I've seen happen is that the friendship usually ends up dying out in some way or another. It's either not as strong as it once was, and it can go back. I've seen it go back after that employment becomes terminated, or the friend goes on to do their own thing, whatever happens. I have seen the friendship go back to normal, but I've also seen friendships and relationships permanently altered based on the way that employee and employer relationship ends too. If you don't end the employment the right way, if it ends ugly, you could end up losing a friendship forever. So be prepared to take that risk. If it's worth that risk to you, then go ahead and do it, but don't go into it thinking that things are just going to stay the same and that nothing's going to be different from it. And the same goes for a partnership, because oftentimes in a business partnership, what happens is one partner feels that they're doing more of the work or they're bringing more value to the table, and sometimes that is the case. And, if the business fails, there could very well be resentment on one side where one partner feels like the business wouldn't have failed if it wasn't for this person, or I lost money because of this person. Those are really the biggest problems that come up when it comes to getting business involved with a friendship, is that you run the risk of losing the friendship, or you run the risk of hurting the business because you're not willing to alter the terms of the friendship. I hope that helps with your decision. If you're in a situation where you're considering getting into business or hiring a friend, I hope that you could take this into consideration before you make that final decision, because it can get ugly, it can get weird. And, I'm very blessed that when I was in both of these types of situations, that I had other friends that were very successful business owners that I was able to call up and talk to about this, and they had similar experiences they were able to help share with me. And based on the experiences that were shared with me, it made it easier for me to figure out what I needed to do. So, if you're going to ask me what I think, I think if you can avoid doing, knowing this, if you could just make a rule to yourself right away, it kind of takes the awkwardness out. If you get approached by somebody who's a friend and says, hey, I know you own a business, can I get a job? You could say, like, listen, I made a rule to myself that I'm not going to hire friends because X, Y, and Z. My friendship with you is too important for me to jeopardize it by having you work for me. And same thing goes for getting into business with somebody. It's crazy because a lot of times you might really believe in somebody who's a friend of yours and you could see an opportunity to get into business together. My recommendation would be, like, encourage and support, but don't get involved necessarily. I'm not saying that it can't be successful or that it won't be successful. I've just seen more often than not that it ends up being weird. And a lot of times too, thing is that a lot of the times if you allow a friend to work for you and they're not performing, it's a lot more difficult to terminate the employment when you're friends with that person, and then even if you righteously do it, that person can hold a resentment against you anyway. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this provided value. You know, if it did provide value, definitely subscribe. I'm going to be, again, doing these videos every other week from now on. I was putting out every single week, but I feel like it's becoming an overkill. I'm going to try the every other week approach for each topic and see if that works better. If there's a demand to go back to weekly, I will. But for now, I'm going to try bi-weekly. And the podcast is going to be bi-weekly until I get back from vacation. And then I'm going to go back to weekly on that again. So just a heads up. Again, thank you guys for watching and supporting. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.